I'm the police chief. I got appointed in April. I've been with Murrieta since the inception of the department 20 years ago. Right now, we started with 25 officers. We've grown with the population. We've reduced our force with the economy a little bit. We're down to 86 officers. We have total with our non-sworn and sworn, we're about 135 employees. That's counting our dispatchers, our records clerks, our PSTs that are out there. And we also have an excellent group of volunteers. We have 35 volunteers that are outstanding. Men and women, most of them seniors, and they all work. I mean, their work ethic is incredible. And, you know, I could double their salary every year. So they really are incredible with what they do. Real quick, just an overview of our department. Probably all of you remember our trailer, right? Our first home? Ken, you've been in our trailer. You were in the front part of the trailer. He was in the good part, the friendly part. But we started out in a mobile kind of police department there. It was supposed to be for a couple of years. That was over 10. But you know what? It was wise. It really was. It was wise in the city with their funding, what they did with that. And so now we have an outstanding building that we actually had input. If you guys have a group of businesses that you think the police department would be a good liaison with, let me know about it. You know what I mean? In a crime prevention source. I did that with G. Wonderleg, with the realtor, the board of realtors. I go to their meetings, and now I have an investigator that goes there to talk to them about and when they're there with their real estate fraud. So keep that in mind. And there's other things we can talk about at those meetings. What I think sets us aside is the majority of our officers still live in the city. They live in Murrieta. They're involved in your churches here. They're involved in your schools, your sports. So they have a vested interest. And when they see somebody driving down the street that doesn't belong or doesn't look right, they're like a sheepdog and that's a wolf, they're on it because they take it personally, and that's their job. That's what I think really happens with our low crime. And speaking of our low crime, when you look at how we determine that, so those of you who don't know, because I know there's a lot of things that get published about lowest crime, safest city, lowest crime. What that is it's part 1 crime. And the FBI actually keeps stats on that, and it's actually 8 categories. There's violent crime, and there's property crime. There's 4 of each. And what they do is it's murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, and then you do theft, your auto theft, the other 2 are one's arson. Those are the property crime issues that you have. And what they do is the FBI keeps statistics on that. Of those statistics, over the past decade, Murrieta has had the lowest overall part 1 crime in 3 counties. We've always had the lowest in Riverside, San Bernardino, and San Diego. This year, for this past year, 2010, 2011, we were 8th in the country with that, based on cities of over 100,000. In the state, we're 4th. Number 1 is Irvine. Number 2 is Simi Valley. Number 3 is Thousand Oaks. And then there's Murrieta at 4. And we are always right there in that top, usually that top 4. We go back and forth. Somebody asked me earlier, well, we just saw Temecula was number 2. And then, well, actually, I think I saw it on a Skyrider. I saw it on I saw flashing lights telling me that. And I can say that because I have a good relationship with their captain, and we joke quite a bit. But what that is that wasn't from the all part 1 crime. It wasn't the 8 categories that the FBI puts out every year. What that was it was a company out of New York. It wasn't CQ Press, which is an independent publisher that usually puts this out. It was another publisher out of New York that I've never heard of. But they used, I think it was 3 of the 8 categories of violent crime. And so they used those 8, and when they did that, Temecula popped up number 2 in the nation for that. I think we were number 4 based on just the same 3 or 4 categories. And so that was outstanding, and I really, I take my hat off. I think that's the first time a contract city or a sheriff has ever had been in a rating like that. So it's really good. We have a very good relationship with them, and that's a safe city also, but it's not safe in Murrieta. So one of the things thing we do have to talk about that relationship is we have a gang task force in Murrieta here. And we've had it now for about 5 years, and it's regional. There's actually 8 of them in our county. And ours covers Temecula, Wildomar, Murrieta, and a lot of the surrounding areas. It's housed in our police department. And what was unique when that task force started was it was through the Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement. And what was set down was a little different than most. Now, we didn't really publicize it too much back then, but it was a wiretap task force, which meant that we would go up on wire on some of these gangs that were starting up. And those wiretaps would travel throughout the state. So we really, it was an extremely advanced task force at that time. The bad guys had no idea we were using wiretaps on it. We still do to this day. We're selective with them. Unfortunately, the NE has been slashed by the state. For those of you that know, they've laid off. That's the oldest narcotic enforcement provision in the state of California. And they just had to lay off over 100 of their agents, 100 of their 300 enforcement agents. These are guys with 20 years experience in law enforcement that are losing their jobs. We lost the supervisor in this unit. I replaced it with one of our sergeants that's going to run that task force now. Temecula has a detective on it. CHP has an investigator. Border Control, Customs, ICE has an investigator on it. Parole, probation. The DA's office has an investigator attached to it. It's an excellent force multiplier for our city. And when we were asked a few years ago, well, we really don't have a gang problem, why do we need a gang task force? I think it's obvious that that's exactly why we want a gang task force, because we're going to keep that from getting in footholds in the city. And they're all over. These guys, they are very aggressive in addressing that and keeping that from occurring in the city. A couple of years ago, there was a really big trend of pharmaceutical drugs, of prescription drugs, Oxycontin. We saw a lot of young people, and actually, not just young people, it was a lot of parents, and a lot of people were getting addicted to Oxycontin. And it was huge overdoses. We actually, one of my investigators ended up becoming a county, actually born in Southern California, an expert in this field. The B&E actually used him on a federal case. And what we did was we went after the doctors for this. We have a doctor who's doing federal time now because of the young boys and some kids who were killed by this, and we could show that it linked to him. It was like, we actually watched them, they're like opioids. He was writing prescription pads, just blanks, giving them to them for $50. These people, and they would go get their Oxycontin, which they were selling. Well, what happened is, the industry has really cut down on that. But what happened when we did that, the addiction was still there. We didn't really think of, okay, what are we going to do with all the people now that are addicted to Oxycontin? What that resulted in is heroin. Heroin now has replaced Oxycontin, and I'm seeing it with young kids. I've never seen this before. I worked hard heroin when I worked in Long Beach, but it was a whole different clientele. They were parolees. A lot of them were, you could see it in that type of clientele where that's what a heroin user was. And then heroin kind of went off the screen for a while. Well, it's back, and it's back very, very strong with the youth, replacing that. And you think of heroin, you inject it, it's a nasty drug. It's probably one of the most addictive and destructive drugs we have. But that's not how they started. How they started is they started by smoking it. It's called chasing the dragon, and they'll initially start smoking the drug, which is a very fast ingestion method, and they get addicted immediately to that. And then what happens, once they're addicted, you waste too much of the drug that way, they'll start injecting it. That's when they're hooked. So we're really seeing that as young now. It was right around the 18, 19, it's moving down. We are picking some of it up in the schools. We're kind of trying to get ahead of it now. We've been really out there talking about it for the last couple of years, but actually about a year and a half now. But it's something that I tell people, because we all have families, we all have kids around us, and you got to be observant for these symptoms of what it is. For heroin, real quick, if somebody's under the influence of heroin, the first thing you notice is their eyes we say their eyes are tight, their pupils are constricted. You'll see nothing but iris in their eye, because their eyes are tight. It'll be a bright sunny day or a dark room, and their eyes are tight. Their pupils are very small. They're very slow. It's a depressant is what the opiate does to them. It's just, you'll notice their movements. They'll be on the nod, they'll be scratching. Those are, you see your children or somebody doing that, that's a huge sign for a drug like that. Something else recently came up in the city that I've been dealing with, and some of you might answer me for a question and answer, but I'll kind kind of covered now a little bit, was red light cameras. Okay, some are going to go, oh, I hate red light cameras, I like red light cameras. I'm not sure, but there's actually an initiative now that's going to be talking about red light cameras and do we want them in our city. I spoke at a council meeting about this and gave my professional opinion of what the statistics have been in the city of Murrieta, but I thought I'd share that with you folks. Because there's a lot, I think about 6 months ago, there was a lot of opposition to that and a lot of things being said about red light cameras in the media from LA. Our camera system isn't like that. And the facts about our camera systems are, one is, when it first came about in 2005, when we started looking at it, I was very skeptical of red light cameras. I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't know if this is something that would work in our community. But what we saw when we put them in, and we were able to control them, because one of the biggest things we heard was, well, you just attack the people making right turns, and it's just to generate revenue, is what we heard. And that wasn't. First thing we said was we're not going to use it to generate revenue. We'll make it basically a neutral cost. So what we make, it can't be, we're not making it as a generator for revenue for us. And one way we did that was with the right turns. With the right turns, we actually, we set those where we could control those to where those cameras don't even trip on that car unless they're going over 10 miles an hour on a right turn. What we were really concerned with were red light violations and broadside accidents. That was our biggest concern, because those are the accidents that basically kill and leave people paralyzed. Broadside accidents for us. The stats on that, I brought some of those, are incredible of what these cameras did for us. Not really, I usually don't read stats at a meeting like this, but these are so impressive that I thought you should, I thought I would. We put these intersections in 3 places. We put them at Clinton, Keith, and Nutmeg. We placed them at Murrieta Hot Springs and Murrieta, and Murrieta Hot Springs and Lakewood. Within that, when we first started these cameras at Clinton, Keith, and Nutmeg, we were having 715 violations per month. That was about 25 a day for that intersection. In 2011, it went from 750 violations per month to 19 per month at those intersections. Murrieta Hot Springs and Murrieta, we had 1,200 violations a month. In 2011, that went down to 20. Hot Springs and Whitewood, we have 2 cameras for each direction. We had 3,150 violations a month. Yeah. 11, as this year, we had 80. It was incredible. And the way we determined how that worked against our broadside accidents, what we did with that was we looked at comparable intersections with the same traffic count, with the closest ones we could find. And what we found is in the last 6 years we've had those in place. At the intersections that have the cameras, we've had 15 broadside accidents. In the intersections, the like intersections that are surrounding that same time frame, we've had 45. So yeah, you saw a threefold decrease, or increase, whichever way you want to look at it, in broadside accidents with the intersections that didn't have these. So as far as if you ask me, is that a force multiplier, does it help safety in this city? Absolutely. The other big thing people said was the fines are jacked up on those to make money. I'll tell you right now, the fine is high. It's $490 for a red light ticket. For one of those tickets, it's high. But this is what's the fact about it is that's the same price if an officer cites you for that. And that there's no difference in the camera or an officer. And also, the police department has nothing to do with those fines. It's determined by the state legislators. They're the ones that do that. And the reason that site is higher than, let's say, a changing lane violation is because of the seriousness of a red light violation, because of the cause of that. That's why they attach a higher amount to it. So it's more of a way for somebody to say, I don't want that ticket. So, but in reality, yeah, that's a good thing. But apparently it worked because the reduction in that, it speaks for itself.